My children found a letter when they were cleaning out my bedroom after their father's funeral. It was in an envelope, tucked inside a book I had not opened in years. The envelope was yellowed with age, and it had a name on it that was not their father's name, Gabriel. They brought it to me with questions in their eyes. Careful questions, because I was grieving. Gentle questions, because they did not want to hurt me more than I was already hurting. My name is Ruth. I am 73 years old. I was married to their father for 44 years. He was a good man. He never knew about the letter. He never knew about Gabriel. The letter was written in 1979. I was 28 years old, married for 3 years, living the life I was supposed to want. I wrote that letter on a rainy October evening in Vienna, sitting in a small cafe that smelled like coffee and old books. I never sent it. I have carried Gabriel's memory for 44 years. Now my children want to know who he was, and I think it is time to tell them. This is the story I should have told them years ago. This is the story their father never knew. I was not supposed to be in Vienna at all. My husband, Richard, was attending a conference for accountants, something about international tax law. I was supposed to stay home in Minneapolis, tend the house, wait for his return, but his company offered to pay for wives to accompany their husbands, and Richard thought it might be nice for me. I think he felt guilty. We had been trying to have children for 2 years, with no success. The doctor visits, the temperature charts, the careful timing of everything. It was turning our marriage into a medical procedure. The trip to Vienna was supposed to be a second honeymoon, a chance to remember why we had fallen in love. Except we had not really fallen in love. We had fallen into convenience. Richard was at his conference from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening. I was alone in a city that felt like a fairy tale. Cobblestone streets, and golden light, and music drifting from every doorway. I had never been anywhere like Vienna. I had never been anywhere, really. That first day, I walked until my feet hurt, past churches with spires that pierced the sky, past markets where vendors called out in German, past cafes where old men sat reading newspapers and smoking cigarettes. That smelled like autumn. I felt alive in a way I had forgotten was possible. On the third day, I found Café Saka, not the famous one, the tourist one, a small place tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, where locals came to drink coffee and eat pastry and argue about politics. The waitress spoke broken English and smiled at me like she understood something I did not understand about myself. I ordered coffee and strudel and sat by the window, watching Vienna live its life outside. That is when I heard him playing. There was an old piano in the corner of the cafe, battered and probably out of tune. Most people ignored it. But Gabriel sat down and began to play, and the entire room went quiet. He played Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major. I knew it because my grandmother had played piano, had taught me that piece when I was 7 years old. But I had never heard it played like that, like it was a prayer, like it was a conversation with something larger than himself. His hands moved across the keys like they were made for that piano. Long fingers, a small scar on his left hand between his thumb and forefinger. When he finished, the cafe stayed quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping, and everyone joined in. He looked up and caught my eye. He smiled. Not the polite smile you give a stranger, but the smile you give someone when you recognize them, when you see something in them that feels familiar. I should have looked away. I should have finished my coffee and walked back to the hotel where my husband was reviewing tax law documents. I should have been the wife I was supposed to be. Instead, I smiled back. He walked over to my table, asked in accented English if he could sit down. His voice was soft, careful, like he was offering me something fragile. Gabriel. From Prague. In Vienna for a music festival that was not quite a festival, more like a gathering of musicians who played in small places for people who really listened. He was 29, a year older than me. He had been playing piano since he was 4. His grandmother had taught him, he said, just like mine had taught me. We talked for 2 hours. About music, about our grandmothers, about the way Vienna felt like a city that remembered everything. I told him I was married. I told him I was only there for a week. I told him I did not normally talk to strangers in cafes. He said he did not normally play piano for strangers either, but something about the light that afternoon had made him want to play. Something about the way I had been sitting by the window, looking like I was waiting for something. I was waiting for something. I just had not known what. When Richard came back to the hotel that evening, he asked about my day. I told him I had walked around. seen some churches, had coffee. All true, just not complete. I went back to the cafe the next day, and the day after that. Gabriel was always there, always at the piano. We would talk between his songs. Small conversations about safe things, the weather, the city, the way the light changed in the afternoon. But there was something else happening. In the silences between words. In the way he looked at me when he thought I was not looking. In the way my heart began to beat differently when I walked into that cafe and saw him there. On my 5th day in Vienna, it rained. The kind of steady, soft rain that makes the whole city feel like it is under a spell. I almost did not go to the cafe. Richard had finished his conference early and wanted to go sightseeing together, but I told him I had a headache, that I needed to rest. Another lie, so easy to tell. Gabriel was at the piano, playing something I did not recognize. Something sad and beautiful and full of longing. When he saw me, he stopped mid-phrase. We sat together by the window, watching the rain turn the cobblestones dark and shiny. We talked about memory, about how certain songs could take you back to a moment so completely that you forgot where you really were. He asked me about my life in Minneapolis, about my husband, my house, my days. I found myself telling him things I had never said out loud, about feeling like I was living someone else's life, about waking up every morning and having to remember who I was supposed to be. He listened without trying to fix anything, without telling me I was lucky to have security, stability, a good man who provided for me, all the things everyone always said when I tried to voice my restlessness. Then he played for me. Just for me. A piece he said he had written but never finished. It sounded like rain on window glass. It sounded like everything I felt but could not say. That night, I lay awake next to Richard and listened to him breathe, even sleep, predictable breathing. I thought about Gabriel's hands on the piano keys. I thought about the way he had looked at me when he played that unfinished song. I thought about choices, about the life I had chosen and the life I might choose if I were brave enough. But I was not brave enough. I had never been brave enough. My last day in Vienna, I went to the cafe one final time. Gabriel was there, but he was not playing. He was sitting at our table by the window, waiting for me. He had something in his hand, a small piece of paper, folded many times. He gave it to me and said it was the address of a friend in Prague, someone who could help if I ever decided to come back to that part of the world. I took the paper. I put it in my purse. I did not tell him I would never use it. He asked if he could write to me. I told him no. I told him I was married, that I lived a different kind of life, that this week had been beautiful, but it was ending. He nodded. He understood. But he said something then that I have never forgotten. He said that some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone to see who they really are underneath all the roles they play. He said he had seen me, the real me, and that whoever I was in Minneapolis, underneath the wife and the good girl and all the things I was supposed to be, that person was worth knowing. I started crying then. Right there in the cafe, in front of the old men with their newspapers and the waitress who always smiled at me. I cried for the life I was leaving behind and the life I was going back to and the life I would never live. Gabriel did not try to stop me from crying. He just sat with me until I was finished. When I got back to the hotel, Richard was packing, folding his conference papers, organizing receipts, checking his watch, ready to return to our regular life. I went into the bathroom and took out that folded piece of paper, Gabriel's friend's address in Prague. I looked at it for a long time. Then I tore it into small pieces and flushed it down the toilet. But that night, I wrote him a letter. I wrote about the week we had shared, about how he had made me remember who I was before I became who I was supposed to be. I wrote about the way he played piano, about the unfinished song that sounded like rain. I wrote about choices and courage and the different kinds of love. I wrote about how I would carry him with me, even though I could never see him again. How he had given me something I would never be able to give back. How some people change you just by existing in your life. For a few days, I sealed the letter in an envelope. I wrote his name on the front. Gabriel. Just Gabriel. I did not have his address, and I would not have sent it even if I did. I put it inside my copy of Chopin's Nocturnes, the book my grandmother had given me. I thought it was appropriate. Music and memory and love letters that would never be sent. Richard and I flew back to Minneapolis. I went back to being a wife. 2 years later, we finally had children. Twin daughters, Sarah and Rebecca. Beautiful girls who grew up to be strong women with lives of their own. I never went back to Vienna. I never tried to find Gabriel. I never sent the letter, but I kept it. For 44 years, I kept it. Through pregnancies and sleepless nights with babies, through the girl's first steps and first words and first heartbreaks, through Richard's promotions and our move to a bigger house and all the small dramas of a suburban life. Through all of it, Gabriel's letter was there. Tucked between pages of Chopin, a secret I carried alone. Richard died of a heart attack 3 months ago. Sudden, peaceful. He was reading the newspaper in his chair when it happened. The doctor said he would not have suffered. The girls came to help me sort through his things. They found his papers, his books, his careful records of everything. Richard was always careful with records. They found my letter by accident. Sarah was packing up my books when the envelope fell out of the Chopin. She picked it up, saw the name Gabriel, and brought it to me. I could have lied. I could have said it was nothing, a letter from an old friend, something unimportant. Sarah would have believed me. She always believed me, but I was 73 years old, and I was tired of carrying secrets, so I told them. I told them about Vienna, about the café with the old piano, about a man who played music like it was prayer. I told them about the letter I wrote but never sent. They listened without judgment. My daughters, grown women, with marriages and children of their own, listened to their mother tell them about a love story that lasted 6 days and changed her forever. Sarah asked if I regretted not sending the letter. Rebecca asked if I regretted coming home. I told them the truth. That regret is too simple a word for what I feel. That some choices shape you in ways you do not understand until years later. That I loved their father, and I loved the life we built together, but that Gabriel had shown me parts of myself I would never have found otherwise. I told them that love is not always about choosing. Sometimes love is just about recognizing, about seeing someone clearly and being seen clearly in return, even if it can only last for a few days in a café in Vienna. Rebecca asked what happened to him, if I ever found out what became of Gabriel. I do not know. I never tried to find him. For all I know, he is still in Prague, still playing piano, still helping people remember who they are underneath all the roles they play. Or maybe he died young. Maybe he married someone who understood his music. Maybe he had children who inherited his hands, his ear for melody, his ability to see people clearly. I will never know. And I think that is how it should be. But now my daughters know. Now the story lives in more than just my memory. They will carry it forward. Maybe tell their own daughters someday about the grandmother who fell in love for 6 days in Vienna and kept the secret for 44 years. The letter is still here, still unread, except by me. I could mail it to Prague, to the address Gabriel gave me all those years ago, but Gabriel's friend is probably gone by now. The address probably does not exist anymore. Some letters are not meant to be sent. They are meant to be written, to be kept, to be proof that something beautiful happened, even if it could not last. If this story found something in you, I would love to know. Tell me in the comments. What letter do you carry that was never sent? His name was Gabriel. For 6 days in Vienna, he played piano for me and reminded me who I was underneath, everything I was supposed to be. The letter still sits inside my book of Chopin nocturnes. And my daughters now know that their mother, once, loved a musician who could make the whole world go quiet with his hands on the keys. Some stories are meant to be told, even if they take 44 years to find their voice.